I want to start by saying I wasn't even supposed to be home that day. The fact alone is probably the only reason I found out what my wife really thinks of me. It was a Friday afternoon. I'd gotten off early from work after my supervisor cancelled our last client meeting. I didn't text her that I was coming home. There was no reason to. I figured I'd surprise her and maybe take her out for dinner or something, I don't know. I was feeling good, proud even. We just wrapped up a big project and I thought maybe we could celebrate. We'd been together 5 years, married for 3, and through most of those years I've been working the same blue-collar job. Low pay, long hours, but it was steady and it covered the bills. It was never my dream job, but it was what I chose when she decided to go back to college full-time. She had dreams of working as a fashion designer, needed time and focus, and I told her I'd support her. I meant it. I picked up overtime, gave up a lot, hobbies, friends, vacations, so she could study, network, and go to unpaid internships. I never complained, not once. So when I walked into the house that afternoon and heard her laughing with her friends in the living room, I froze for a second in the hallway because I thought I heard my name. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was just trying to figure out if they were talking about something I should stay out of. But then I heard her say it, loud and clear. "Oh, please, Tyler's job isn't real. I mean, he works, sure, but it's like loser job energy. No future plans, no savings. He's just doing the bare minimum while I build a real career." Then laughter. Her friends didn't even push back. One of them actually said, "Girl, I don't know how you do it. That would drive me insane." And then my wife said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. He just feels like a placeholder sometimes, like I wish I could have waited and married someone more on my level, you know. But I got stuck. And now I'm carrying both of us. I stood there in the hallway, keys still in hand, stomach sinking lower with every word. She didn't know I paid off 2 of her student loan installments just last month. She didn't know I'd skipped out on dental work I needed because I didn't want to risk our budget being tight while she tried to land that dream job she now brags about at every family gathering. She didn't know that the no savings comment was technically true because every spare dollar went towards her career. I backed out quietly and didn't let them know I'd come home. I drove around for hours, didn't cry, didn't scream, just sat in the car and went numb. The next day, I started making changes. I stopped paying the rest of her student loan bills. They were in her name. I'd been covering them because she said it gave her anxiety, and I didn't want her stressed while job hunting. But now, nah. Let her remember where that degree came from. I started applying to colleges, trade programs, night schools, online certifications, anything that could move me towards what I wanted to do, data engineering. I'd been obsessed with it for a while, but kept putting it off, thinking I had to be the stable one while she chased her dreams. But now I knew what that stability meant to her. Nothing. I didn't tell her anything at first, just started quietly saving, restructuring, and preparing. Eventually, I quit my job. I told her I needed a break to rethink my future. She rolled her eyes but didn't ask much. She assumed I was just tired and would crawl back to something similar. That's the kind of vision she has for me. A tight little box she labeled unambitious husband. She had no idea I'd already enrolled in a program. No idea I was rebuilding myself from the ground up while she kept running her mouth to her co-workers and friends about how she's the only adult in the relationship. Fast forward 2 years. I'm now 1 semester away from graduating with a specialty in systems and data infrastructure. Already landed a job offer that pays 5 times what I used to make, and 3 times her current salary. And here's the best part. At a recent family dinner, my younger cousin, who's a software engineer, started asking me questions about my career plans. I started answering honestly, talked about the company that offered me a position, the relocation package, and the benefits. Everyone at the table was impressed. Jaws dropped. Her parents asked her how much she was making, and suddenly she didn't want to share. She stared at me across the table like I'd slapped her. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen and hissed, "You made me look bad in front of my parents." I calmly said, "No, you made yourself look bad when you lied to everyone about me being a burden while I was funding your career behind the scenes." She just stood there, stunned. And then the meltdown came. Tears. Accusations. She said I blindsided her, said I let her humiliate me while secretly plotting to upstage her, that I should have talked to her first. "Oh, you mean like when you talked about me first?" I told her I wasn't her placeholder. I wasn't her safety net, and I damn sure wasn't her emotional punching bag to make herself feel like a success. She said I was being vindictive. I said no. Vindictive would have been telling your friends the kind of person you really are. This is just me finally prioritizing myself. We're still technically married, but she's been sleeping in the guest room for the last 3 weeks. There's been a weird silence between us, like she doesn't know what to do with the fact that I'm not apologizing or groveling. I don't plan to. In 4 months, I'll be moving to a new city for the new job, with or without her. I supported her dream. She spat on mine. Now I'm building something better without her hands in the foundation. She can stay back with her real career and the friends who think my job was a joke. Funny how quiet they'll get when they realize the joke's on her. Update 1. The job offer was finalized 2 weeks ago, salary confirmed, relocation package approved, temporary housing covered. I signed the contract the same day and started wrapping things up on my end. Bank accounts, apartment paperwork, and notifying my current landlord. I didn't tell her right away. Not because I was trying to be cruel, I just didn't feel like I owed her that conversation anymore. She wasn't part of the decision-making process, not after what she said about me, and certainly not after months of acting like she didn't care what I did unless it made her look good. But I knew I had to tell her eventually, so I waited until a quiet evening when she was actually home early and not already moody from her job. I figured if we were ever going to have a real conversation again, it had to be then. I told her straight, "I'm moving in 2 weeks." She stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. At first, she thought I meant for a vacation or a training trip. Nope. I told her it was permanent, that I'd accepted a job in a different city like I had said before, that I'd found a place and would be moving, that I'd be taking nothing from our shared apartment except what I personally paid for, and that I had no plans of coming back. I told her I had already spoken to the landlord and I had asked him to remove my name from the lease as I would no longer be paying the rent. She asked in shock if I was kidding. I said no. Then came the tears and then the screaming. I've never seen someone go from confused to furious so fast in my life. She asked if I was leaving her. I said I didn't know what there was to stay for anymore, that we hadn't been a team in years and that pretending like this marriage still worked was insulting to both of us. She said I was overreacting to one thing she said. One thing? I reminded her that she didn't just say it once. She'd been saying it for years, just not directly to me. I reminded her of the dozens of times she made jabs about me wasting potential, or not thinking big enough, or being too content with small dreams. I reminded her of how easily she sat there and called me a loser to her friends without ever correcting them. She said she didn't mean it. I said, "But you said it anyway, repeatedly, and you never cared about how that made me feel until you realized I wouldn't always be the guy standing still behind you." That shut her up, for a moment at least. Then she tried bargaining, said we should try counseling, said she could change, that she realized she'd been taking me for granted and was just stressed out from trying to succeed in a cutthroat industry. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care enough. I told her that I'd supported her unconditionally for years, and when the roles were reversed, she didn't even show up. She didn't offer support. She didn't believe in me. She treated me like a weight around her ankle. She said that wasn't true. I just laughed. Now she's cycling through every stage of grief in real time. One day she's overly sweet and making me dinner like the old days. The next, she's storming through the apartment, slamming drawers and accusing me of throwing away everything we built. But what did we build, really? Because from where I'm standing, I built her dream. I funded it. I encouraged it. I protected it while mine sat in a box collecting dust. And now that I've finally dusted mine off and given it a chance to grow, she's the one who can't handle the imbalance. She's been asking me to delay the move. Said she wants us to try and fix this first. I said no. She asked if I'm seeing someone else. I'm not. She asked if I'm planning to file for divorce. I said eventually, probably once I'm settled. She's been crying every day since, calling her mom, calling her sister, spinning the story into something where I'm a heartless husband who got a good job and decided she wasn't good enough anymore. Classic. What she doesn't say is that I stayed plenty long when I was making $18 an hour and covering her tuition bills with second-hand laptops and late-night food deliveries to her internship. I stayed when she was barely scraping by and asking me for help. I stayed when her anxiety kept her in bed on her exam days and I had to talk her through breathing exercises over speakerphone from the break room. I wasn't the problem when I was invisible, but now that I've got something of my own, now that I'm not stuck behind her anymore, suddenly I'm the villain. I packed up most of my stuff already, told the landlord I'd be gone by the end of the week. Didn't even ask her if she wants to stay or move out. That's on her. I'm done trying to manage her life for her. She keeps asking what she's supposed to tell people. I told her to tell them the truth. That I overheard her mocking me in front of her friends. That I stopped playing the quiet, supportive husband that I chose myself for once. And I've been choosing myself for the past 2 years. That I decided I was tired of being the fallback plan for someone who never saw me as her equal. She didn't like that answer. But that's the thing. When you spend years pretending someone is beneath you, don't be surprised when they finally leave you behind. I told her that now she could go find someone who is finally on her level. Update 2. People keep asking why I didn't just file for divorce the second I decided to leave. Truth is, I thought about it a lot. But at that point in my life, I was already stretched thin emotionally, mentally, and even physically. Between finishing school, lining up the move, securing housing, handling job onboarding, and mentally preparing to walk away from a marriage I had poured my whole life into, it was too much. I knew if I tried to file then and there, it would consume everything. Court dates, paperwork, potential financial arguments, and drawn out emotional manipulation. She would have weaponized every ounce of guilt she could. I couldn't afford that. Not while I was building the foundation for the life I wanted. Not when I finally had a shot at focusing on me. So I chose to wait, not forever, but until the dust settled and I had both feet firmly planted somewhere she couldn't reach, which took me 2 years. And I think it's fair considering how much of my time, money, and life she wasted. It wasn't about running from conflict. It was about protecting my momentum. I'd wasted enough years pausing my own life to make sure hers kept moving forward. I wasn't going to risk stalling out just so I could say I ended things the right way. I'll get there. The divorce is coming, but on my timeline, when I'm ready. She doesn't get to be the priority here. I do. Story 2. I am 19, female, and the youngest person in my entire extended family by a long shot. My parents had me way later in life. My siblings were already in middle school and high school when I was born. Everyone always called me the oops baby. I have heard that phrase more times than I can count, and not always in a playful or affectionate way. Growing up, I always felt like a bit of an outsider. My siblings were doing their own thing, going off to college, getting married, having kids, while I was still in elementary school. Most family events, I was kind of left to entertain myself. The one person who never made me feel like a mistake or an afterthought was my grandfather, my dad's dad. Grandpa and I were close since he lived nearby. I would spend a lot of weekends at his house. He was a quiet, patient man and had this amazing collection of antique watches, mostly pocket watches, but also some early wristwatches. He would let me help him clean them, wind them, and sometimes even take them apart and learn how they worked. It was one of the few things that really bonded us. I don't think anyone else in the family cared about the watches. They always thought it was just Grandpa's weird hobby. Fast forward to this year. Sadly, Grandpa passed away. He lived a long life, but it still hit me hard because we were close. The whole family gathered a couple of weeks later for the will reading. Everyone already knew that the big prize was going to be Grandpa's land. He owned about 50 acres in an area that had become pretty valuable. Developers had been trying to buy pieces of it for years. The expectation was that it would be divided up and everyone would walk away with a nice chunk of change. When the will was read, that's more or less what happened, except for me. Each of my siblings, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, got pieces of the land. The lawyer explained that, based on recent market estimates, each portion was worth somewhere between $45,000 to $55,000. Not life-changing, but still a good amount of money. Then came my part. I did not get any land. Instead, Grandpa left me his entire collection of antique watches. The lawyer also read a handwritten note from Grandpa to me, saying he hoped I would continue caring for them, the way we always had together. That was it. No land, just the watches. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. There were some stifled laughs. One of my cousins actually snickered loud enough for the whole room to hear. Someone muttered, "Guess that's what you get for being the oops baby." It stung a lot. I felt humiliated and honestly a little heartbroken. At that point, I was not thinking about the watch's value. I just knew I had no land, no money to help with college. I am currently a sophomore at a state university and I have been scraping by on scholarships, part-time work, and some student loans. I was really hoping I'd get something from Grandpa that could help lighten that burden. After the will reading, I approached some family members, my dad, my older brothers, a couple of my uncles and aunts, and asked if they might consider sharing a small portion of their inheritance with me. I explained I was not trying to be greedy, I just needed help with tuition. The reaction was not great. They laughed it off. One aunt said bluntly that I was not owed anything. My dad told me I was an adult now and needed to figure it out on my own. One of my cousins made another comment about how being the accident kid finally caught up to me. I left that gathering feeling humiliated and alone. A few days later, when I finally had the emotional energy, I opened the chest with Grandpa's watches. It was This beautiful old wooden trunk filled with dozens of watches, some in pristine cases, others showing their age. I started sorting through them, remembering all the afternoons I spent with Grandpa, learning about each piece. Out of curiosity, I decided to take a few of the more unique-looking ones to a local antique dealer who specializes in vintage timepieces. He was polite but did not seem too interested until I showed him the watches. His entire tone changed. He carefully examined them and said I should definitely get a proper appraisal. Some of these watches were extremely rare. That kicked off a whirlwind couple of months. I got connected to a well-known appraiser who worked with an auction house. We spent weeks cataloging, researching, and appraising the full collection. Turns out Grandpa's watch collection was much more valuable than anyone ever realized. He had several extremely rare, historically significant pieces, limited editions from the early 1900s, one-of-a-kind prototypes, and even a couple of watches with links to European royalty and famous collectors. The final estimated value of the collection? Over $500,000. I was in complete shock. I had no idea. I had always seen them as sentimental, something Grandpa and I shared, not a massive financial asset. Word got out when the appraiser contacted a few private collectors and auction houses. I guess one of the dealers mentioned it to someone who knew my family because suddenly my phone was blowing up. The same family members who had laughed at me for getting junk were now calling, texting, emailing. They weren't congratulating me, of course. They were furious. Apparently now it was unfair that I got something worth so much when they only got pieces of land worth about $50,000 each. My dad called and told me flat out that Grandpa probably didn't know how valuable the watches were and that I should split the money with the family to be fair. One of my aunts accused me of being sneaky by getting the watches appraised without informing the family first. A cousin posted a long passive-aggressive rant on Facebook about how some people care more about money than family, clearly aimed at me. Here's the thing. When I asked for help politely, respectfully, right after the will reading, no one cared. No one offered even a small gesture. I was mocked and told to figure it out myself. Now that the watches turned out to be valuable, they are all acting like I owe them something. I've decided I'm keeping the collection. I plan to sell a few of the highest value pieces to cover my tuition and living expenses so I can graduate without drowning in debt. The rest I'll keep, both because I love them and because they remind me of Grandpa and the time we shared. I honestly believe this is what Grandpa wanted. He left the watches to me specifically. He knew no one else cared about them. He knew how much they meant to me. He even wrote that little note about wanting me to care for them. Now the entire family is gossiping and calling me greedy. Some are threatening legal action, which a lawyer friend told me won't go anywhere, since the will was clear and properly executed. I am honestly exhausted by all the drama. So, AITA for keeping the watches and using them to secure my future, even though the rest of my family is now claiming it's unfair. After my post, I went ahead with selling a few of the rarest watches through a reputable auction house. The process took a little time, but in the end, I made more than enough to pay off my current student loans and cover the rest of my tuition. I felt so relieved. For the first time, I was not constantly stressed about money or the future. I also kept about half the collection. The pieces that meant the most to me and ones that Grandpa and I used to work on together. Of course, the family kept up the passive-aggressive comments. My aunt even sent me a long email saying I was spitting on Grandpa's memory and tearing the family apart for money. The Facebook gossip continued too. It sucked, but I tried to tune it out. Then came the twist I never expected. About 3 weeks ago, I got an email from a woman named Margaret who lives in Switzerland. She had seen one of the watches listed at auction and recognized the maker's mark. Turns out her grandfather was the original watchmaker for some of the rarest pieces in Grandpa's collection. She had been trying to track down some of the missing watches for her family's private museum. We exchanged emails and she offered to fly out to meet me. Curious and a little cautious, I agreed. When we met, she brought documentation and photos. It turns out that a few of the watches Grandpa owned were ultra-rare prototypes that her grandfather had made for a European royal family before World War II. Only 5 were known to exist. And here's the wild part. According to her appraiser and museum board, just one of those prototype watches could be worth well over $1 million, far beyond what my original appraisals had shown. I was stunned. Grandpa must have known some of this. He was incredibly knowledgeable, but he never bragged or mentioned the potential value. Margaret offered a very generous sum for the prototype watches, plus an invitation for me to visit Switzerland and see their museum, which I'll definitely take her up on. I'm now working with my auction house to handle the sale properly. Meanwhile, the family got wind of this, no surprise, and the drama has exploded again. I have now been called everything from greedy to manipulative, but at this point, I have accepted that no matter what I do, they will be upset. So now, the Oops baby has the potential to graduate debt-free, invest for the future, and maybe even travel, thanks to a collection no one else cared about. I can't help but think Grandpa would be smiling right now. Update 2. I did not expect to be posting again so soon, but things have gotten even messier. After meeting Margaret from Switzerland and learning that 2 of Grandpa's watches were ultra-rare prototypes, I worked with the auction house to quietly arrange a sale. Margaret's museum made an official offer, and if all goes through, I'll have enough to finish college debt-free, buy a small condo, and still keep many of the watches that meant the most to me. Unfortunately, news of this leaked. I suspect one of my cousins, and suddenly the whole family is losing their minds. What started as passive-aggressive comments has turned into full-blown hostility. One uncle called me immoral for keeping the money. A cousin who once called the watches junk posted a Facebook rant about how I was dishonoring the family. And the biggest shock, my own dad has now hired a lawyer to contest the will. He and a few relatives claim Grandpa was not of sound mind when he gave me the watches and that he did not know their value. This is nonsense. The will was fully legal, witnessed, and Grandpa was sharp to the very end. Meanwhile, I'm getting guilt-tripping emails saying I'm tearing the family apart. The same people who laughed when I asked for help with college are now desperate for a piece of this. One aunt even showed up at my apartment uninvited, pretending to be concerned about me, then suggesting I do the right thing and split the money. I did not let her in. It's been stressful. Thankfully, my lawyer says the will is solid, and the auction deal is still moving forward. A couple of cousins and friends have been supportive, but most of my family has turned on me. I honestly think Grandpa would be heartbroken to see this. He wanted me to have the watches because we shared that bond. No one else ever cared. I'm considering going low contact with most of them after this is settled. I have accepted that no matter what I do, they will see me as greedy. But all I did was honor what Grandpa gave me, something they never valued until it was worth money. So yeah, the Oops baby is still holding her ground. But wow, what a mess. Update 3. I thought this whole nightmare could not get worse, but it did, and now it's finally over. As I shared before, My dad and a few relatives tried to contest Grandpa's will, claiming he was not of sound mind. Their case was weak. The will was clear, fully legal, and witnessed. My lawyer filed the necessary responses, and thankfully the judge quickly dismissed their challenge. Legally, the watches are mine, but here's where it gets truly nasty. After losing in court, my dad and one of my uncles sent a mass email to the entire extended family, painting me as a selfish, greedy child who betrayed Grandpa's legacy. They accused me of lying about the value of the collection, even though the appraisals were public record, and claimed I had manipulated Grandpa. The tone was vicious. They even CC'd some distant cousins and church members trying to shame me publicly. I was devastated. I could not believe my own father would stoop this low, but then the twist. Remember Margaret, the Swiss museum director? She saw the drama online. Yes, the family's Facebook rants had reached her. She sent me a kind message and an offer. The museum would fly me out to Switzerland for a full tour, and during the visit they wanted to formally dedicate a wing of their exhibit to Grandpa's collection in his name, honouring both him and our shared love for the watches. It moved me to tears. Grandpa would have loved that. I accepted immediately. Last week I flew out, met Margaret, saw the beautiful display they're preparing, and realised this is my real family now. People who appreciate what Grandpa loved, not bitter relatives fighting over money they did not care about until they smelled profit. As for my dad and the rest, I have cut them off. Full no contact. I blocked numbers, emails, everything. I may be the oops baby in their eyes, but I am finally free of their toxicity. And Grandpa's legacy will live on, not in petty land squabbles, but in a beautiful museum in Europe. So yeah, it's over. And honestly, I have never felt stronger. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.